Donald Trump says a lot when he goes off script, maybe too much for his own good. His speech in the Knesset earlier this week in the bizarre circus at Sharm el-Sheikh, where victory laps for Trump the Emperor and the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, his proconsul. In the mad, unhinged narrative that Trump has been schooled to talk in by his religious Zionist backers, Israel was celebrating not only its victory over Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon or the Revolutionary Guards in Iran, but the last 3,000 years of history, whether real or imagined in the Bible. Off script, Trump punctuated this orgy of self-congratulation with a few home truths. He revealed how dependent Israel had become on American arms, recalling how Netanyahu pleaded for weapons Trump didn't even know existed. He reminded Israel of how small it was and how it couldn't fight world opinion. He confirmed how he had forced Netanyahu to stop the war. He said, "Bibi, you're going to be remembered for this far more than if you kept this thing going, kill, kill, kill." He revealed how the American Jewish billionaire couple Miriam and Sheldon Adelson had more trips to the White House than anyone else he could think of, and how the late Sheldon had been responsible for persuading him in his first term of office to recognize Israel's annexation of the Golan Heights. Had this been said by anyone other than Trump, it would have caused outrage by pro-Israel groups in the US. To assert that a democratically elected president was influenced by an unelected Jewish billionaire is an anti-Semitic slur, but that is exactly what happened. Worse was to follow in Sharm el-Sheikh, where Trump arrived hours late and which soon fell apart into a circus. Two of the Arab and Muslim leaders about whom Trump had bragged in the Knesset were on the point of boycotting the event, one in mid-air, when they learned that Netanyahu himself was going to turn up. Netanyahu was not originally on the guest list, but when rumours began to circulate that Trump had forced the hand of the Egyptian president Abdel Fattah el-Sisi to invite him, Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan kept his plane in the air. A fierce backlash developed at home for the Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani. Netanyahu was swiftly disinvited, and his office issued a statement saying he would not attend because it was on a Jewish holiday. Two other major players, Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and the UAE President Mohammed bin Zayed, failed to show. Now, there are different theories about why this happened. Was it pique that rivals Qatar and Turkey appeared to have made all the running in the negotiations for the ceasefire? Were they angry with Egypt? Or were they unhappy that Steve Witkoff, Trump's envoy, and Jared Kushner, his son-in-law, had to talk directly to Hamas to get a ceasefire? As the Jordanian commentator Abdul Hadi al-Majali noted, has Hamas grown and become the size of America? Or has America shrunk and become the size of Hamas? Or were they just being naturally cautious at endorsing a process that was half-baked and for which they would ultimately end up paying? I tend to think the latter, but one thing is crystal clear. The Abraham Accords, so loudly flaunted as the model for this peace in our time, lack the foundations that Trump and Kushner seem to imagine they have. It's one thing to hold joint military exercises with Israel in secret, as the Washington Post revealed, while the genocide in Gaza is in full flow, but quite another to have your leader photographed next to Netanyahu. That is still a bridge too far. That shows how scared these autocrats are of popular opinion, more than a decade after they crushed the Arab Spring. It also shows how fragile the regional consensus is for normalizing with Tel Aviv, and how strong still are the fears that all of this could be a way of establishing Israel as the new regional hegemon. Their fears have little to do with the Palestinians, for whom they care little. This is about their own standing as leaders and their own sovereignty. No sooner, of course, had this circus flown home than Israeli forces returned to business as usual in Gaza. Israeli drones and tanks haven't stopped firing and killing Palestinians in Gaza in daily violations of the ceasefire. On Tuesday, Israel shut the crossing at the Rafah border with Egypt and cut aid supplies again on the pretext that Hamas had not delivered all the dead bodies of its captors. The difficulty in retrieving these bodies had been extensively discussed in negotiations, and a formula for discovering where they were was written into the agreement, with Hamas declaring it would need international help to do so. Israel bombed Gaza so intensely that it not only killed some of its own hostages, along with their guards, but also the guards of the dead bodies of the hostages. In some cases, all contact with these Hamas units was lost. A statement issued by the family of Tamir Nimrodi, a captive soldier whose body was returned to Israel from Gaza on Tuesday, said their son had been murdered by Israeli airstrikes. So what does this week's theatre amount to? Clearly, the 2-year war has stopped without achieving its major goal for Israel, which was to force the expulsion of roughly half the population of Gaza, tipping the demographic balance in favour of the Jews. Clearly, too, Israel failed to demolish Hamas as a military organisation. After a brief battle with the northern clans in Gaza, it has re-established control in all the territory that Israeli forces have withdrawn from. Hamas still has command and control, and this is not what Israel wanted. It wanted to foment civil war, but it hasn't happened. It's also clear that Netanyahu was forced against his wishes to stop this war by Trump. Netanyahu depended on the war for his political survival, but it also suited his ideological mission to prevent any Palestinian state of any size or description from forming. It's not clear how Netanyahu can pursue both of these goals in peacetime. He will have to rely on talks about Hamas's disarmament hitting the buffers, which they will surely do, and use that as an excuse for restarting operations. In the meantime, he's doing everything he can to sabotage the deal, as he's done several times before. But when it resumes, military action is unlikely to be on the same scale. Gaza will revert to the situation we see in South Lebanon, where Israel is free to bomb targets it claims are legitimate, whether they are or not. It will also continue to limit aid and reconstruction in Gaza. This will have both positive and negative consequences. For the foreseeable future, Israel will continue to keep siege of Gaza in place. But as night follows day, this action will guarantee that Gaza remains in the bullseye of global attention. Unlike Oslo, Sharm el-Sheikh didn't bury this conflict, let alone end it. No Western leader will be able to argue, as they did after Oslo, that the protests should be shut down because negotiations over a Palestinian state are still going. This time, no negotiations exist. All that exists is Israel's attempts to return to war. This will not only keep global demands for a Palestinian state energized, it will also expose the Qatari and Turkish negotiators who signed up to this deal. Their eagerness was all about what they perceived to be their national interest, staying as close as possible to Trump himself. That way, they would get their F-35s. But this is not what the people of Turkey want, and Erdogan has shown himself, at least in one election, vulnerable to an Islamist party that cashed in on the government's reluctance to confront Israel. He could be vulnerable again if Israel returns to war. All Muslim and Arab countries that signed the ceasefire declaration own this deal as much as Trump does. And if the siege continues, that is not a good place for them to be. If Oslo was the end of the first intifada, Sharm el-Sheikh will be the start of a new chapter of this conflict, which is open-ended. For Palestinians, who were almost totally omitted from the circus in Sharm el-Sheikh, to which President Mahmoud Abbas was invited as an afterthought, the most pressing issue is the total failure of their leadership. Israel refuses to release from prison the men who could form a government that could unite all factions, but other potential leaders exist in Fatah. The continued presence of Abbas and his declared successor, Hussein al-Sheikh, is meaningless. Their only function is to suppress dissent and to preside over decay and retreat. The former leader, Yasser Arafat, gave away all but 22% of historic Palestine and the right of return when he recognized Israel. Even that legacy has been eaten away by hundreds and thousands of settlers in occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem, many of whom now are armed. The urgent task for Palestinians now is to force the retirement of their leaders, rebuild the Palestine Liberation Organization and all institutions, whether in Ramallah, Gaza, East Jerusalem or the diaspora, and present Israel and Trump with new facts on the ground. If the regime of Bashar al-Assad, the former Syrian dictator, could be blown away with scarcely a shot being fired, how many of Abbas's men will actually fight to keep him in power? There is no excuse for delay. The Palestinians have seen how alone they are. They've seen their Arab and Muslim brothers do nothing except kowtow to Trump. They know that the occupied West Bank is being annexed, whether it is announced officially or not. They know Israel will expand its area of control, stifling what little sovereignty Arab nations actually have. No white knight on a charger is coming to their rescue. Gaza has shown that the only people who can shape the future of Palestine will be the Palestinians themselves.